Hello, everyone. Welcome back to the channel. Hope you're well. You know, when this current government got into power last July, we've had a bit of a bumpy ride, to say the least, and I don't think this year is going to be any easier. They had a bit of a paper-thin policy. You know, they got in really because the Conservatives blew it. We were just unhappy with at least a decade of nonsense. And any promises or guarantees that Starmer may have made have quickly gone by the wayside as if they never happened at all. Now, one of the things that I find laughable is the fact that they've made some very horrendous policy choices which have affected an awful lot of people. It really started off with the winter fuel payment getting scrapped all that time ago, if you remember. And it's gradually got worse. But what's happening in every case is they put it in, everybody kicks off, they think, blah, 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 and then there's a U-turn. So many U-turns. Now, the suspicious part of me thinks, well, what's this all about? Nobody can be that useless. There's U-turn after U-turn after U-turn. Just doesn't make any sense, does it? Now, I found a list of literally every U-turn, which I think is a pretty good summary. It's on Politico. You could see all Keir Starmer's government U-turns in one place. And there's a few of them. And look at him. Look at that boat race, a bit worried. So London, if there's one thing Keir Starmer has mastered in office, it's changing his mind. Absolutely. Unless it comes to free speech, of course, you'll end up behind the door. The PM has been pushed by his backbenchers towards a flurry of about turns since entering Downing Street just 18 months ago. People often say that they're surprised he's still in his job. I'm not, because people like him, once they're in, they're very, very difficult to shift. And let's just say on the off chance they do get out, you have to wonder who's going to end up in their place. Think about that one. And some of the options are very horrific. Starmer's vast parliamentary majority hasn't stopped him feeling the pressure and has meant mischievous MPs are less worried their antics will topple the government. Politico recaps 11 occasions MPs and other pressure groups mounted objections to the government's agenda and forced the PM into a spin. Expect this list to get a few more updates, so we check back on this later. So the first and foremost, which we've spoken about over the last few days, is digital ID. That's a biggie. So Starmer's government has suffered a New Year identity crisis. The PM announced last fall that a mandatory digital ID scheme for people to prove they have a right to work in Britain was in the works. The backlash was swift and brutal. Opposition parties loathed the scheme. Public support for digital ID collapsed, and the policy wasn't even mentioned in the PM's party conference. Anger from Labour MPs about the way the proposals were communicated, focusing on illegal working rather than the benefits of digital ID to ordinary voters, and a delayed consultation made a watered-down fudge feel inevitable. Lo and behold, less than 4 months later, the compulsory digital ID will now be optional. Chancellor Rachel Reeves, said the government is now pretty relaxed about the form in which digital checks take place. And it took 109 days to turn the corner of that, the U-turn. Now, word of warning, word to the wise with digital ID, don't fall for it for a second. It's still there. It will take some form, somehow, somewhere. That I will guarantee you. It won't go away. Remember, slowly, by stealth. Always remember that. The next one, pub business rates. You've got to think the English doing their business. They gather in pubs and have a chat about it. Let's shut the pubs down. Getting on the wrong side of your local watering hole is never a good idea. Many Labour MPs realise that the hard way. Chancellor Rachel Reeves used her budget last year to slash a pandemic-era discount on business rates, taxes levied on firms from 75% to 40%. Cut queue-up rules from publicans. Labour MPs were barred from numerous boozers in protest at a sharp bill increase, afflicting an already struggling hospitality sector. A £300 million lifeline for pubs, watering down some of the changes, is now being prepped. At least Treasury officials should now have a few more places to drown their sorrows. Time to U-turn, 43 days. Now, at the end of the day, businesses thrive in an environment where they're not going to get taxed to oblivion. If they're not going to get taxed to oblivion, they got more money to put into the economy, more money to invest in their businesses, help them grow and get things going. And, you know, the pubs are the lifeblood of our communities. Without them, you look at the damage that was done during that time where we all had to stay at home, protect things. It's all going in that kind of agenda. And do you remember the time where Starmer walked into a pub and the landlord went ballistic and had him thrown out, gone? Yeah, me too. And that's happening to a lot of them. Farmers' inheritance tax. Now, this was a right. Oh, I hated this one. Part of Labour's electoral success came from winning dozens of rural constituencies. This is what you have to remember. The decisions that are being made there, you know, it's shafting the people in the communities that voted for them. But Britain's farmers soon fell out of love with the government. Reeves' first budget slapped inheritance tax on farming estates worth more than £1 million from April 2026. Now, you see that picture there. I went up to one of the farmers' protests in London and, you know, it was very, very well attended. Apart from the fact that Kemi Badenoch and Ed Davey hijacked the stage and talked a load of old shit. But apart from that, it was, you know, ever so well attended. There was another one that took place where they actually wanted to spray shit all over Westminster. And it was put a stop to. And certain bars were put on these things as well. There was a ruling in the courts where it was recognised that protests are supposed to cause an inconvenience. But at the end of the day, if they don't, what's the point? It's it really waters it down. And this is the police, you know, being instructed again to do whatever. Aimed at closing loopholes wealthy individuals used to avoid coughing up to the exchequer. The decision generated uproar from opposition parties, calling the measure the family farm tax. And farmers themselves who drove tractors around Westminster playing Baby Shark. Yeah, I remember that. Campaigners, including TV presenter and newfound farmer Jeremy Clarkson, joined the fight by highlighting that many farmers are asset rich but cash poor, so can't fund increased inheritance taxes without flogging off their estates altogether. And you've got to think that farms are generational. You know, they pass them on to their kids and they wouldn't be able to do it. So the farms would become extinct. Solar panels and houses, I suppose. A mounting rebellion by rural Labour MPs saw the government sneak out a threshold hike to £2.5 million just 2 days before Christmas, lowering the number of affected estates from 375 to 185. Why ever could that have been? And it took them 419 days to turn around on that. This one was disgusting. Winter fuel payments. This was one of the first things that they did, which raised several eyebrows. Labour's election honeymoon ended abruptly just 3.5 weeks into power after Reeves made an economic move no chancellor before her dared to take. Reeves significantly tightened eligibility for winter fuel payments, a previously universal benefit helping the older generation with heating costs in the cold months. Given pensioners are the cohort most likely to vote, the policy was seen as a big electoral gamble. It wasn't previewed in Labour's manifesto and made many newly elected MPs antsy. After a battering in the subsequent local elections, the government swiftly confirmed all pensioners earning up to 35 grand would now be eligible for the cash. That's one way of trying to bag the grey vote. Time to U-turn, 315 days, nearly a year. Now, you've got to think that many people don't vote, and they're effectively buying votes with that U-turn, but they shouldn't have done it in the first place. People were arguing that, there were pensioners with millions of pounds of assets were getting a winter fuel payment. Yeah, but you can't treat them as harshly as, you can't treat poorer people harshly like you do the others. They just mess the entire thing up, and our pensioners overall aren't being looked after. Welfare reform. Labour wanted to rein in Britain's spiralling welfare bill, which never really recovered from the old Kung flu. The government vowed to save around 5 billion quid by tightening eligibility for PIP, a benefit helping people in and out of work with long-term health issues. It also said other health-related benefits would be cut. However, Labour MPs worried about the impact on the most vulnerable and nervously eyeing their inboxes, weren't impressed. More than 100 signed an amendment that would have torpedoed the proposed reforms. In an initial concession, the government said existing PIP claimants wouldn't be affected by any cuts. I've got a friend of mine that was really worried about all of this. It wasn't enough. Welfare Minister Stephen Timms was forced to confirm in the House of Commons during an actual ongoing welfare debate that eligibility changes for future claimants would be delayed until a review was completed. What started as 5 billion quid of savings didn't reduce welfare costs whatsoever. Got a balls up and 100 days to U-turn that. At the end of the day, the welfare bill's a bit of a sticky wicket because there are people that worked all their lives hard and do genuinely deserve the support. Friend of mine I've mentioned many times on the channel, he'll never work again. He can't. But there are many that take the piss, like having PIP and all the rest of it. And then the next week, photograph running down the street like Roger Bannister. Those are the ones that really take the mickey. But they always try and pick a one-size-fits-all approach. Oh, here's a doozy. Now, this ties into my video that I brought out previously. So the gangs inquiry, the wide-scale, wrongdoing towards girls across Britain over decades re-entered the political spotlight in early 2025 after numerous tweets from ex-owner Elon Musk. It led to calls for a specific national inquiry into the scandal. Starmer initially rejected the request, pointing to recommendations left unimplemented from a previous inquiry into child SA and arguing for a local approach. Well, the local approach didn't really do any good, did it? Starmer accused those critical of his stance, aka Musk, of spreading lies and misinformation and amplifying what the far right is saying. So, we're worried about our kids and they call us all far right. Less than 6 months later, a rapid review from crossbench peer Louise Casey called for a national inquiry. Starmer soon confirmed one would happen. Time to U-turn, 159 days. The problem is with inquiries, particularly ones of this nature, they are delayed, really, really delayed, to the point where it's years. And generally, they're staffed with people that really want to brush it under the carpet as if it never existed. That's the kind of thing we're dealing with. I think Rupert Lowe and his inquiry has made more progress on any of this than, the rest of them have done in years. It just shows you the difference. Island of Strangers. There's one we remember. Immigration is a hot button issue in the UK, especially with Reform UK leader Nigel Farage breathing down Starmer's neck. The PM tried reflecting this in a speech last May, warning that Britain risked becoming an island of strangers without government action to curb migration. That triggered some of Starmer's own MPs who drew parallels with the notorious 1968 speech by Enoch Powell. There was nothing notorious about it. The PM conceded he'd put a foot wrong a month later, giving an Observer interview where he claimed to not be aware of the Powell connection. I deeply regret using the term, he said, 46 days. But what he's trying to do there is cover up incompetence that has been through his government and previous, and he's made a hash of it, having it back down. 2-child benefit cap. Now, this is another doozy. You know, here's the U-turn that took the longest to arrive, but left Labour MPs the happiest. Introduced by the previous Conservative government, a 2-child welfare cap meant parents could only claim social security payments such as universal credit or tax credits for the first 2 children. Now, you've ended up with a generation of mums and dads who have literally had child after child after child. I'm aware of a few people with 5 or 6 kids. And then you cap it off at 2 kids. They're like, ugh. But with this U-turn, I mean, we finish here. Many Labour MPs saw it as a relic of the Tory austerity era. Yet just weeks into government, 7 Labour MPs lost the whip for backing an amendment calling for it to be scrapped, highlighting Reeves' preference for fiscal caution over easy wins. A year and a half later, that disappeared out the window. Reeves embracing its removal in her budget last fall as a child poverty busting measure got plenty of cheers from Labour MPs, though the cap's continued popularity with some voters may open up a fresh vulnerability. That's nearly 500 days to U-turn on that. Now, this is where it's all backwards. This is the difference between, you know, that socialist kind of attitude and capitalism. In my mind, you need to incentivize parents through the tax system to not sit at home, but go to work, or at least the father goes to work, the mother stays at home, or to share the burden equally. One of the two, but you can't have a burden on the finances of the state forevermore. I mean, child benefit, for example, has been going on for years and years and years. They used to call it mummy money, you know, and it's something that's always been there at the heart of the debate. WASPy women compensation. My own mother had a problem with this, and there are many, many others as well. This one is a tale of 2 U-turns. After showing support for the Women Against State Pension Inequality campaign in opposition. So this is the thing. They'll say one thing while they're not in government and to change their mind when they're in. Starmer and Reeves had a change of heart after winning power. Ministers confirmed in December 2024 that women affected by changes to their state pension would not be compensated because of unaffordable cost to taxpayers. Yet you chuck billions of pounds away every year. Don't get me started on that. Last November, Work and Pension Secretary Pat McFadden said the government would reconsider its original decision. It is considering fresh evidence, so could yet again reject calls for compensation. Watch this space, 329 days. So, you know, you've got all of these women that have planned for their retirement all their working life. And a lot of them can say, you know, we paid national insurance, we paid blah, 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 and we want to retire at an age. The government moves the goalposts, and you have things like mortgages, you have other things tied into this that are all supposed to conclude, how can you financially plan for the later half of your life when all this is going on? Damn right you need compensating. I couldn't agree more. I think it was initially everyone born after a certain date in 1954 was the problem. Labour made a huge fanfare when entering government about being the party of workers. The clue, after all, was in its name. A flagship piece of legislation spearheaded by the then Deputy Prime Minister, Angela Rayner, the growler herself, promised improved employment rights, including the ability for workers to claim unfair dismissal from their first day, down from the current 2-year eligibility. Yet despite the bill comfortably passing the Commons with Labour's huge majority, the House of Lords wasn't impressed and repeatedly sent it back to MPs for another look. Eventually, ministers relented through gritted teeth with a compromise granting rights from 6 months of employment. The pragmatic approach got the bill through Parliament, but left some Labour MPs especially irate in the unelected House. 510 days for that. Now, workers' rights is a funny thing. I mean, I have 5 guys that work for me all on a self-employed basis, and I tell them, you look after me, I'll look after you. And that arrangement works on a self-employed basis. But if I was employing them and I was paying their tax and I was doing all the rest of it, then I would make sure that they felt valued, they felt rewarded, because at the end of the day, a happy employee will do everything they can to improve and help my business. But there are companies out there which do take the piss, but there is a fine line between a happy employee and overall business profit. Because if the employee gets too many costs, too many rights, at too much of a cost to the business they're working for, our business will fold because they can't afford the burden, or people will lose their jobs. Staff cutbacks. It's that simple. You know, a lot of these clowns in that place haven't got the first clue how to run a business at all. Reeves' first budget as Chancellor in 2024 saw her pledge to end the freeze on income tax thresholds from 2028. Keeping it in place would hurt working people, she said. But just over a year later, amid some expensive U-turn to fund, Reeves had a change of heart. In her second budget, Reeves extended the freeze on thresholds rather than increase the rates to 2031, a measure it estimated will raise at least £8 billion, 392 days for that. Funny thing about tax, you can freeze thresholds all you like, you can do other things all you like, but at the end of the day, if it's not in people's pockets, you're not going to raise it. You've got to think of other ways to get the government out of the trillions of pounds of debt it's in. You've got to think of other ways to raise capital, because I'm telling you now, the tax system ain't it. There you go, a series of rather embarrassing, suffering U-turns and, you know, defeat after defeat after defeat in a very short space of time. What's it been, 6 months, if that? How much more are we going to have to put up with? Let me know in the comments. Anyway, thank you for listening. If you're on YouTube listening to this, please subscribe. If you're on X, give me a follow, hit the like button, leave comments, and I look forward to talking to you soon. Toodaloo.